Okay, good morning. So, welcome to DHARMA IAS PSIR test series. Okay, so we'll discuss test number 1 here. I hope I'm audible. Okay, so total 6 tests we have conducted. In that, today we'll discuss test number 1. Okay, so the first test is test paper number 1A. In that, all the questions we are going to discuss. So first question is feminist theory of state. Again, question is for 10 marks. So you can directly start with what is feminist theory of state. Okay, as such there is no concrete theory of feminist theory. So you can directly mention that for feminist theory came in the context of patriarchal notion of state, which is traditional, projected by mainstream political theorists like liberals, Marxists, and etc. So main concern of feminist theorist scholar is that the state is patriarchal nature, which is again projected by radical feminist. We all know that. Radical feminist. Okay. Am I audible? Okay, so feminist theory, I was saying radical theory. Before that, you can briefly mention about liberal theory. Mary Wollstonecraft talked about civil and political rights. Then you can briefly mention Marxist also in this, Engels and all those people. Engels' book, Origin of Family, Private Property and State, where Marxists also believe that capitalists are exploiting the woman, they do not have any freedom. But the main crux of feminist theory of state comes from the radical theorists. In that we can quote a number of radical feminists. Okay, Catherine McKinnon is there, Susan Moller Okin is there. All their main concern is personal, is political. Because historically Aristotle restricted personal from the interference of political, okay, for the public. So in that context, radical feminists argue that Carol Hamish, personal is also political. But this radical theory again criticized because there is a confusion among them. What is the role of state in the context of gender or giving justice to the woman? On the one side, radical feminists talk about patriarchal notion of state, but on the other side they talk about justice from the state, differentiated citizens and etc. Okay. In that context, Werner Mortier argued that the feminist must come with concrete theory of state. they must come with the concrete theory of state. Without that, will not have complete theory of state from the feminist. So you can quote Mote here in the conclusion that the feminist must give concrete or crystal theory of state. Okay, very simple 10 marker. There is no extra scope to detailed explanation here, just to be point feminist theory of state. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Then second question, equality of outcome. Again, this is from equality topic. There are different notions of equality: equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. Equality of outcome. Is it okay now, Lavanya? Yes, Lavanya? Am I audible properly? Okay, fine. So, next topic is please cooperate. This is the first live, so there might be some technical issues, but please cooperate. Second question is equality of outcome. So equality outcome in the context of, we have to understand equality of opportunity. So equality of opportunity, this is liberal projections. Classical liberals, equality of opportunity, that is formal equality. But in this context, equality of outcome was promoted by Marxist scholar or socialist scholar, especially Marxist and socialist. So their main concern is not only equality of opportunity, but they believe in the outcomes to establish perfect equality or absolute equality. For them, absolute equality is important. So Marxists talk about abolition of private property, okay, classless society, stateless society, to bring this absolute equality or equality of established equality of outcome. Okay, but this is very idealistic understanding, or it is utopia. To establish equality of outcome is utopia. So in that context, middle path is given by social liberals. You can mention, after explaining this equality of outcome by the Marxist or socialist, you can bring social liberals like Rawls, you can bring Amartya Sen and Dworkin also. So Rawls' approach, that is difference principle, considered as middle path between this equality of opportunity and outcome. Because equality of outcome, this is again very idealistic principle. Okay, so here what can be the flow? Define equality of outcome, mention directly in the introduction, then give the context, equality of opportunity, in that context socialist Marxist views, and then criticize equality of outcome or give different narration from the social liberals like Rawls, Amartya Sen and Dworkin also. Okay, and conclude with Indian Constitution, affirmative actions, articles 16, 15 and others also. So you can mention that. Okay, fine. Then third one is M.N. Roy's radical humanism. Third question is M.N. Roy's radical humanism. Okay, so here you can directly start with M.N. Roy as a philosopher. This radical humanism came from him very late in 1940s. Till that time he covered whole his journey from revolutionary to Marxist, then Gandhian, congressman, and then radical humanism. Radical humanism, you can mention in the introduction his book, Revolution, Reason Reason and Romanticism. Okay, that very famous book of M.N. Roy. In that book, he has discussed his concept of radical humanism. This radical humanism, he was influenced by law, again, secular politics of law, secularism of law, Hobbes' materialism, and Spinoza's ethics. Spinoza's ethics. Okay, so this is the foundation of his theory of radical humanism. And his radical humanism is based on three ideas: reason or rationality, ethics, and freedom. So M.N. Roy wanted to liberate human beings totally. That is radical. So he criticized liberals, he criticized Marxists, he criticized Gandhians, and projected radical human being, detached from everything: caste, religion, culture, nation state, etc. So that is his concept. And what is the method? So he criticized Marxist and other schools and proposed radical humanism through radical democracy. Radical democracy, which is nothing but decentralization of power. And here he proposed partyless democracy. And another method is education, through education. Fine. Any doubts? So here you have to cover M.N. Roy, introduction, then body, and then conclusion. Yes, conclusion can be, it is again very idealistic or utopian idea. He was far ahead of his time, no doubt about it. Okay, it remained utopia, but it is cosmopolitan in nature. That is your conclusion. Fine. Then fourth, Hobbes' social contract. Again, there was one question on Locke's social contract, so I added Hobbes' social contract. Okay. Again, social contracts theories. We all know that. You can mention from that in the introduction. Social contracts, Hobbes in his book Leviathan gave social contract in the context of anarchical nature of state of nature. He was influenced, of course, by materialism. That's why Karl Marx called him father of all of us. Father of all of us. Descartes, pleasure and pain, French scholar. Descartes, pleasure and pain doctrine. On the basis of his understanding of this materialism, Hobbes proposed that state of nature is anarchical nature. There is anarchy, there is no law and order, there is no scope for industry, well-being, welfare, etc. So to aim that, Hobbes proposed absolute state through his social contract. That is Leviathan. Okay. So based on his human nature, he proposed that, and he gives absolute power to this particular Leviathan. So he established sovereignty of that particular Leviathan. That's why first modern thinker. But you can compare Hobbes with here Locke. Unlike Hobbes, Locke has optimistic understanding of human nature, which is balanced, and that's why he proposed limited state. So you can conclude with Locke, limited state. Okay. Fine. Any doubts? Okay. Then significance of political theory. Again, this also we have covered in daily answer writing sessions. So, political theory, you can start with political theory. Introduction, you can quote any scholar, Sabine, political theory, anything related to politics or political affairs. Okay, So you can start with definition of political theory. The question is asking about significance. Indirectly, it is about relevance, okay, of political theory. So here you can start with mainstream ideas of political theory, like normative and empirical. Normative and empirical. Normative approach focused on, of course, we know that justice, liberty, etc. And empirical facts. So both these approaches have their own significance in the 20th century, also even in the contemporary era also. Based on that, we can say that again behavioralism emerged, and which significantly contributed in the analysis of political phenomena. So that is also significance of political theory, but it led a decline, and we have post behavioralism, which is nothing but combination of both facts plus values. So this can be one approach to tackle this question. You can go directly with analysis also. There you can quote a number of scholars like C. Wright Mills, or John Plemons. According to them, political theory serves the purpose. Famous statement of John Plemons: it is not an escape mechanism, it is an arduous calling. Time and again, political theory has given solutions for the human society, like what can be the nature of state, what should be the nature of justice, why revolutions are happening. All these topics have been discussed by the political theory historian. And his argument, John Plemons was saying that we cannot just focus on the facts. We have to bring crux of the political theory in the analysis, that is justice, that is values, that is law, that is state. So he focused on that, and once again in the context of post-behaviorism, political theory revived. C. Wright Mills also says the same. Political theory gives explanation about different phenomena. So that is the significance of political theory. You can mention Andrew Hacker also in the conclusion if you want. Andrew Hacker in his book argued that role of political theories is dwell in nature. Role of political theories dwell in nature, scientist as well as philosopher. Scientist as well as philosopher. Unlike natural sciences or general sciences, political scientist has dual nature. We simply cannot restrict ourselves, political scientists cannot restrict themselves to the field of facts. We have to bring norms, values in the study. In that way, we can give solution to the society. Understood? Okay. Political theory, you can have scholars John Plemons, C. Wright Mills, and Andrew Hacker in the conclusion. Fine. Okay. Then next, how far and what respect is behavioralism an improvement upon the traditional approach to the study of politics? Account for the post-behavioral revolution. Okay, again, this is related to last point only. So, question is asking, how far and what respect is behavioralism an improvement upon the traditional approach to the study of politics? So, you can start with behavioralism, context of emergence of behavioralism in the introduction. Directly, you can mention 1950s, because of traditionalist political theory was losing its significance or relevance. In that context, scholars like David Easton came up with behavioral approach in the political science. Behavioralists focus on the facts rather than history, values and norms. Because traditionalists essentially focus on values, justice and etc., and they fail to give justification for the rising trends like fascism and Nazism. And post World War II, no one was asking about the views about the political scientists. So David Easton, Charles Merriam, all those people were concerned about the theory, political theory, and they proposed this scientific approach, that is behavioralism. Okay, so that is context of behavioralism. Now, of course, it is considered as revolution. Behavioralism is considered as a revolution in the political science or discipline. Why revolution? Because it changed everything. It was revolution, of course. It changed nature, it changed scope, and it changed methods. So that's why this is revolution. Okay. So nature, from philosophical to became empirical or fact based. We need facts. Lord Bryce, correct? Then scope, earlier only state, justice, philosophy, etc. philosophical. Now scope enlarged, fact-based analysis, groundworks and etc. electoral behavior, etc. And methods, of course, scientific methods. Techniques, 8 intellectual foundations of David Easton, like science verification, etc. Techniques, okay, quantification. Those methods we use in the general sciences, physics and chemistry. So he brought all those aspects in the political theory. So this is modification of traditional approach by the behaviorist. Understood? Fine. This is first part. How far and what respect is behaviorism and improvement upon the traditional approach to the study of politics, and account for the post-behavioral revolution. Now, second part is why post-behavioralism came then. Traditionalist, then behavioralism, and now post-behavioralism. Again, this is first decline. Behavioralists also failed to justify rising social movements in 1950s, 60s in the US and other countries, like Black Lives Matters and other social movements in the West. So, issue of justice became prominent in 1960s in the West. In that context, David Easton himself gave post-behavioralism. That is credo of relevance and creative theory. So he thought that rather than technique is important, no doubt, but substance is also important. So he combined facts and values and gave birth to the post-behavioralism. Robert Dahl also talked about end of dichotomy between facts and values, and post-behaviorism emerged. So this was reflected, post-behaviorism was reflected in the works of John Rawls, Macpherson and other scholars. John Rawls' theory of justice, Macpherson's radical democracy. So this is post-behaviorism. Okay, fine. Any doubts? So this can be your flow. Okay, next question. The theory of class war is the heart and soul of communist ideology. Now, this is again very straightforward question, code-based question. Question is asking essentially on class struggle, class war in communist ideology. So you can start with this communist ideology, Karl Marx. So here you can directly quote Karl Marx. Okay. So all the total history of human being is nothing but class struggle. So you can start from that. Directly give the context or the Karl Marx understanding of history. That is communist ideology. So this is German ideology or German. In his work German ideology, he gave class struggle or this revolution, or you can mention Communist Manifesto also. You can mention any of Communist Manifesto. In his book Communist Manifesto, he talked about this class struggle or class conflicts in the context of prevailing situation in the West on the basis of historical materialism. So So in the introduction, you can bring keywords: historical materialism, all hitherto existing society, human history is nothing but class struggle, class war, and etc. Then you can talk about his historical materialism, historical context of class wars. There you have to mention Hegel. Hegel idealism, historical dialectical idealism. To counter his dialectical idealism, Karl Marx came up with materialism. That mention should be there in the second paragraph. Understood? Then you can talk about prehistorical stage, then slave society, then feudal society, then capitalist society, and then socialist society, socialism. So that journey you can bring in the answer. In the body you can add like in every epoch ideas of ruling class are the ruling ideas. Then state is an instrument of bourgeois class. So those kind of points you can mention in the body. Okay. So no doubt in orthodox Marxism, class war is the supreme or the main concern or the main theme in the communism, in the communist ideology, class war. There is no doubt about that. But this theory has been changed by Marxists themselves. Like Lenin brought many changes in that. Original Marx idea of class struggle was different. That point you have to mention in the last paragraphs. Lenin, rather than we can say binary understanding of class struggle, he brought peasants in the revolution along with workers. Correct? But of course, at the front, workers were there. Then Mao also brought changes in class struggle. He also added peasants in the class struggle. So communist ideology, yes, class struggle. That is in orthodox Marxism, or communist ideology in orthodox Marxism is the class struggle, main idea. But in that also we have different structures or different themes, like Lenin's idea, Karl Marx's idea, and Mao's idea. Okay. So this orthodox Marxism was criticized in the conclusion you can mention this orthodox Marxism later on criticized by neo-Marxist or critical school. And no longer class struggle remain the main theme of communism, okay, or Marxism in the theory and practice also. So Gramsci argued that if we want to bring communism, we have to focus at state level and civil society level. Okay. So first we have to fight at civil society, then at the state level, that is then class struggle. So there are different understanding of this particular class war in the communism. Okay. So comment you can mention it remained utopia. The Marx prediction never came true in an original understanding of Karl Marx. Then, of course, Russian Revolution took place, but that was very different, as unlike as projected by Karl Marx. Fine. Then give a critical account of Kautilya's political ideas and examine their relevance to the contemporary ideas of government and politics. Okay, question is asking to relate his ideas to the contemporary ideas of government and politics. Okay. Here you can simultaneously discuss his ideas and you can connect those ideas with the contemporary issues. You can start with Kautilya, Arthashastra, political economy approach, realist school or realism. Then main ideas: Mandal theory, Saptang theory, fourfold theory, six-fold theory. So you can mention all those ideas and simultaneously you can connect those ideas in the contemporary to the contemporary issues. Like whenever you are discussing Mandal theory, you can mention about geopolitics. Today's geopolitics. So there you can mention Russia-Ukraine war, India-Pakistan, India-China. Whenever you are discussing about Saptang theory, so you can mention importance of Bala, that is force, or Artha, that is economy. You can mention right now China, USA, trade war, and etc. So trade is important, force is important, all those issues are important. When you are discussing fourfold theory, okay, so all Sam, Dam, Danda, Bhed are fair in the protection. If you want to protect the national interest, you can use all those Sam, Dam, Danda, Bhed. That is fourfold. That is also relevant in the context of international politics. That is to protect national interest. And sixfold also. Whenever you want to have ceasefire, you can have that. So you can give post Operation Sindoor ceasefire. India, Pakistan accepted ceasefire. That is also relevance of this theory or six folds. If you want to mobilize force, you can mobilize. If you want to have ceasefire, you can ceasefire. If you want to break treaty, you can break treaty like Indus Water. You can give ideas, connections. That is also part of six-fold. Fine. So main ideas are this: Mandal theory, Saptang theory, four-fold theory, six-fold theory. Other ideas, corruptions and etc., ethical ideas are there. You can bring those also if you want. But these political ideas should be there in your understanding. And while discussing these main themes, you can connect all these things to the contemporary issues, government and politics. Fine. Okay. Shall we move? Yes, Lavanya, any issue? Okay. Next, discuss Sri Aurobindo's concept of nation and his theory of spiritual nationalism. Again, Sri Aurobindo, you can in the introduction you can mention about Chittaranjan Das, C.R. Das, or Tagore, prophet of humanism or Indian nationalism and etc. You can bring those people in the introduction, C.R. Das and Tagore on Aurobindo Ghosh. Okay, so he has given cultural nationalism, we all know that. What is his theory of nation? Here you have to bring debate, whether India is nation or not. Here, main schools at that time, colonial historians and Indian nationalists. Colonial masters projected that, even Lord Curzon and all those people, India is not a nation, and it was never. Indian nationalists, liberals, Surendranath Banerjee, they accepted some part of this particular theory, colonial theory. India is not a nation, it was not a nation. But they argued that India can become nation under the influence of Western ideas or colonial rule. So India is in making, nation in making. That is the argument given by Surendranath Banerjee. Against this idea of nation projected by colonial masters and Surendranath Banerjee or mainstream nationalist, Indian nationalist, Aurobindo came up with idea of nation under the influence of culture. And he argued that India was always in nation, just India's spirit. We need to awake that Indian spirit. It is in sleep right now. So we have to awake that spirit. So he was influenced by Bankim Chand Chatterjee, Mother Goddess, and Vivekananda. and he argued that India is a nation, okay, or rather it it has potential to become Vishwa Guru also. So that is his understanding of nation. And nation, we have to liberate this nation, which is right now under the control of British rule. So he brought his cultural nationalism to liberate this nation. Okay. So his cultural nationalism was also based on his understanding of Indian civilization or culture. Again, he was influenced by German ideology or German philosophy, Herder's nationalism, and Vivekananda's nationalism, or Vivekananda's New Vedantanism, and Bankim Chand Chatterjee's again mother goddess Shakti. He linked nationalism to the culture or religion also. And he said that Indian cultural understanding is very different than, we can say, East. Of course, he was influenced by West, especially Germans, but he brought self, Satchidananda, in his understanding of nationalism. And he said that if we want to liberate India, we have to understand culture and other aspects of India, and in that only we can liberate this India. That is political liberation of India. But before that, we have to awake this spirit of nationalism. Okay. So his idea of nation is very much linked to the cultural nationalism. Okay. So then he gave his ideas like passive resistance and etc. to liberate India. Passive resistance, Swadeshi, Swaraj, and all that, boycott, all those aspects he gave to liberate India politically. That is from the British clutches. So this is idea of Sri Aurobindo's concept of nation and theory of spiritual nationalism. Fine. It is just discussed, so no need to comment and etc. Fine. Then briefly discuss the nature and scope of political science. This question already we have taken in the daily answer writing sessions. Here, political science, don't get confused. It is discipline. Nature and scope of political science means it is a discipline. It is not stream of political theory. So nature of scope of political science, already we have discussed, its scope depends on nature. So if you are historical, if you are philosophical, if you are empirical, or if you are art, if you are thinking subject is art, then your scope also change. Suppose you are saying that the nature of political science is philosophical, then scope will be justice, equality, like norms, values and norms. If you are saying that nature is empirical, then you are talking like facts, like elections, votings, etc. If you are saying that the nature of political science is art, it is an art, then you are talking about statecraft, like Machiavelli. So nature and scope of political science depends on this question. You can address this question by this way. So nature, the discipline can be philosophical, can be scientific or empirical, can be art. Okay. If you are mentioning philosophical, you can add Plato, Aristotle, Leo Strauss. If you are mentioning it is scientific, then you can mention other behavioralist school scholars. And if you are mentioning it is an art, you can mention Machiavelli and public administration. So it depends on your understanding. But it is widening, scope is widening. Right now, scope is widening because of new trends in the political science. like environmentalism, then postmodernism, and these new schools have brought new ideas in the discipline. So that's why you can mention Oakeshott also in the conclusion. In the political science, we are moving in borderless and bottomless sea. Okay, it is very vast, enlarging discipline. Fine. Okay. Then most of the people address this question in this way: the political theory, and it has two main streams: political philosophy and political science. So political science is subset of political theory. Don't get in that way. Political science means discipline, not stream or subset of political theory here. Okay. And again, if question comes like in this way, discuss nature and scope of political theory. Same data will be there, same content will be there. Okay. Interchangeably they can ask. Any doubts? Fine. The next question.
सर
Yeah.
पॉलिटिकल सायन्स इज मास्टर सायन्स असं म्हणते एक्स्ट्रा त्याच्यामध्ये तो कसं पॉलिटिकल सायन्स डिफरंट लाईफच्या इश्यूज डील करते प्रॉब्लेम्स हीच लाईफ त्याच्यामध्ये
Yes. Political science is master science. Why? Because unlike other schools, it has responsibility to solve the issues, and all other sciences take clue from the political science. Aristotle was very multidimensional personality. He was in medicine, philosophy, literature, and after that he came to the conclusion that it is master science. Okay, it can have anything in the analysis. So that's why he called political science as master science. Fine. Then next question: elucidate the concepts of liberty and equality. Examine that the two cannot be reconciled in the modern state. Modern state means, of course, this post-Westphalian or this Westphalian state, modern state, sovereignty, and etc. Liberty, equality. We have to elucidate these concepts. Okay, again, introduction. These two are contested topic like other topics in the discipline. Correct? Liberty and equality are again very contested topic. Different schools are there, different people are there. For them, different understanding is there about these two themes or the concepts. But as far as the relationship between liberty and equality is concerned, again we have different schools. Here you can bring though that debate. Liberty and equality are opposite to each other, and they are complementary to each other. So this debate we have to write in the second part of the question. Illustrate liberty. There you can mention liberty. For the liberals, liberty is important. Then you can mention all liberals, classical liberals, Locke, and etc. Equality, illustration. Equality, it is important for the Marxist and even for liberals also, but equality of opportunity. So that part you can write in the first part of the question. I am talking about relationship between liberty and equality. Okay, so there are two primary views on this. Liberty and equality cannot be the conflict is there, and that conflict cannot be resolved because liberals believe that if you are attempting to establish equality, naturally we will compromise liberty, because in the pursuit to establish equality, the state might become authoritarian, and in the process liberty will be compromised. So they always believe that equality and liberty cannot be we can say reconciled. Okay, you can mention Locke and neoliberals, Tayak and all those people in this first part. Then for Marxist, without having equality, liberty has no meaning. So they preferred equality, Marxist, and they labeled liberty as a false consciousness in the liberal world, especially Karl Marx. And they promoted freedom. So for them, freedom from wants is important. They don't prefer liberty. The middle ground is social liberals or positive liberals. Here you can mention positive liberals as well as social liberals. Positive liberals, T.S. Green, he proposed positive state. That is, the state is there to hinder the hindrances. Positive liberty. So he proposed or he advocated positive role for the state in the empowerment of people. Same thinking was continued by social liberals. Rawls, Amartya Sen, Dworkin. Rawls through his difference principle, Amartya Sen capability approach, and Dworkin equality of resources. So yes, it can be reconciled. It's not like that they are opposite or against each other. Equality and liberty. Example, you can give example of Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution. Affirmative actions. Affirmative actions, Article 15, 16. Fine. Oh. Next question. Critically examine Rawls' egalitarian conception of social justice. Next question. Critically examine Rawls' egalitarian conception of social justice. Again, you can start with directly Rawls, social liberal. Introduction. Rawls is social liberal. In his famous book, A Theory of Justice, 1971, gave his theory against utilitarian or pantheism, that is greatest happiness of greatest number, under the influence of Immanuel Kant. Then you can mention Rawls' procedure to establish that social justice through social contract, veil of ignorance, and original position. Then he gave three principles: liberty, equality, and difference principle in a lexical order. Fine. So here you have to mention why he gave this difference principle to establish his egalitarian justice, egalitarian nature of justice. Then here you can mention about weakest link should be as strong as strongest link, that chain connection. Okay. So if anything comes out, that is inequality, if that inequality serves the purpose of weaker section, that is fine. So he proposed we have to take into consideration weaker sections needs. So that is the way to establish his egalitarian justice. Okay. Now this egalitarian nature of justice was criticized by communitarians. After discussing all these principles, you have to bring communitarians, because question is critically examined. Now you first should mention about communitarians, because they are the critics, real critics of John Rawls. So communitarians like Walzer and Sandels, Michael Sandels, they talked about spheres of justice and limits of justice in liberal world. Sandel criticized John Rawls for his understanding of human nature, atomistic human and all that, liberals and all. And they propose community-oriented understanding of human being. Man is situated self. We cannot remove human beings from the society or community rather. So they propose community-oriented notion of justice. Walzer gave spheres of justice. We cannot give universal principle of justice. We have to take into consideration different spheres: family sphere, public sphere, political sphere, economic sphere. There and then only we can establish justice according to Rawls. Okay, nonetheless, conclude with Rawls. He tried to establish, or he tried to reconcile all these people, communitarians, socialists, and liberals. So his three principles, Rawls' three principles: liberty, equality, and difference principle. These are nothing but, we can say, combination of liberalism, socialism, and communitarianism. Because through difference principle, he also wanted to make community strong. Okay, so it is argued that Rawls' theory is nothing but combination of all liberalism, socialism, and communitarianism. Understood? Fine. Then distinguish power from authority. How does reliance on authority affect the nature of power? Again, first part is very easy. Already so many times UPSC asked this question last time also. Distinguish power from authority. Power and authority. So here also there are different concepts. So power, traditional concept is power of A over B. Robert de Helen, etc. And then we come, or Marxist understanding of power. Marxist also project that it is exploitative and it lies with state. Okay, and state is controlled by bourgeois class. That is conventional understanding of power. We have unconventional understanding of power also, which is Hannah Arendt, Gramsci, and Gandhi. Okay, so these are different types of power or understanding of power. As far as the relation between power and authority is concerned, basically we have to discuss three schools here. You can discuss three schools as far as relationship between power and authority is concerned. Of course, first school is liberal, given by Max Weber, and he said that authority is nothing but power plus legitimacy. Correct? Legitimate power is authority for Max Weber, and he gave three types of authorities: charismatic authority, traditional authority, legal, political authority. That is first school. Then second school is Gramsci or Marxist also. Gramsci argued that your authority is not, you are saying that your authority is based on consent, that is liberals, but that consent is manufactured, and that's why it is not legitimate. Fine, second school. And third, which is very important, most of the people don't write this, third, Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt's understanding of power and authority. This is also very important, very relevant. In her book, On Violence, she argued that power lies with the people and authority lies with the state. And state uses authority on the basis of force, coercion. So that understanding of relationship, power and authority, you have to write. So again, as far as the relationship between power and authority is concerned, it is also debatable topic. It is also debatable topic. But we do follow constitutions and etc. So Max Weber's understanding, we follow key power lies with the state, and the state's power is legitimate power and etc. Fine, but you can bring all these three schools in your understanding or answer. Now, how does reliance on authority affect the nature of power? This topic, how does reliance on authority affect the nature of power? Again, same, with the same content you can write this particular part also. Suppose if you are saying that the state has power and the state has authority, that is liberal. So to establish your authority, you will use different tools to establish your legitimacy, and in that way to enjoy your authority, like free and fair elections, free and fair elections, freedom of speech and expression, media, free media, etc. So if you are saying that your authority is legitimate, if you are arguing your authority is legitimate, then you will try to establish that legitimacy, that is legitimation, through different means. Okay. But if you are arguing that your authority is traditional, then you might be using different methods to establish your power or your authority. That is, we can say passion, to arouse passion, you can give an example of Hitler. Okay, so if your authority is traditional, we are using Max Weber's understanding. If your authority is traditional, your methods can be different, like use of passion, unconditional or complete surrender of human beings to the state and etc. If your authority is, we can say, charismatic, again Hitler and etc. So here also you will use same kind of principle. Traditional like Britain's kings, monarchs and etc. Charismatic also same. What was the traditional authority of king, divine nature of king and etc. So they will use those kind of doctrines to establish your authority. But if your authority is legal or we can say legitimate, constitutional, you will use these methods, constitutional method. Okay, understood? So how does reliance on authority affect the nature of power? So if you are using Max Weber's understanding of authority, that is authority can be legal, traditional and charismatic, then your instrument of power, methods can be different then. It depends on the nature of authority. Okay, so this is how does reliance on authority affect the nature of power. Any doubts in this?
Sir,
Yes.
reliance on authority makes the power positive किंवा more acceptance म्हणजे या टोन मध्येच राहायचं.
Yes, you can mention that. It depends on. Suppose that's if you are saying that your authority is legal or legitimate, so you will use all those legitimate means. But if you are saying that no, I am here to rule, so you will use coercive powers also.
हां.
So if people challenge you, take the example of Bangladesh. So your authority was not based on sound grounds. The people asked, and government has to leave. So that kind of situation happened. So if your authority is based on rationality, legal grounds, so you will use power in that way. Correct? But if your authority is based on illegitimate means, so your reliance on power also change. You might use force, irrational means and etc. Just happened in Bangladesh and even some part of in Sri Lanka also last time. Okay. So reliance on authority affect the nature of power. Okay. Next question. Discuss the characteristic of sovereignty as advocated by John Austin. To what extent do you think the pluralist criticism of Austin's concept of sovereignty is justified? Again, John Austin, legal jurist from the 19th century, came up with monistic theory of sovereignty. Lectures on jurisprudence, 1832. John Austin. Of course, influenced by Hobbes' complete sovereignty. He established legal theory of sovereignty. Legal theory of sovereignty. John Austin established that within a territory, sovereign should be having complete authority. Okay, no one can challenge that person. And there should be group of people to exercise that sovereignty. That is his feature. That is, government should be there technically, and people must habitual obedience should be there from the people. So these are his characteristics of sovereignty. Within a territory, there should be complete say for the sovereign. That sovereignty should be exercised by the group of people or a person. That is, he puts people into the command, into the office to enjoy that or to exercise that sovereignty, and other people should be habitually obeying that particular sovereign, that is the state or the government, and that obedience should be habitual, that is permanent, continuous. There should not be any break from the people as far as the obedience is concerned. Suppose people are not obeying the sovereign, that sovereignty is having no meaning. Okay, and the state sovereignty is supreme over all other, like tradition, culture, or society or family, everything. So he established the complete theory, legal theory of sovereignty, and on the basis of this legal theory, many Western countries used this doctrine to exercise their power. But this concept became very problematic, that is complete sovereignty to the nation state or the group of people. And this concept was misused by some leaders in the 20th century like Hitler and Mussolini. So in that context emerged pluralist theory of sovereignty like Lasky and McIver. They argued that if we are giving complete power to the people, to the sovereign, that sovereign might use that power for his or her own benefit or interest. So there might not be any check and balance on this particular sovereign. So they propose pluralism or pluralist theory. Within a society, there cannot be single center of power. As society is federal, so the authority, according to Lasky. Society is federal. There are different components, entities in the society. Family is there, church is there, culture, traditions. So all they have own understanding or own zones of sovereignty or power. So state is one among them. So the state has no complete authority or power or sovereignty. McIver, he gives concept of service state. Service state. The role of state is to serve the people, not enjoy the power. So we call them moderate and extreme plurals. Okay. We see inconsistency in the thought of Lasky. Lasky says that yes, there are different constituents who have power, but the state is keystone in that structure. Keystone. Okay, fine. Nonetheless, pluralist theory is the most relevant theory in the context of globalization. That we all know. You can give example, European Union and etc. Okay, full sovereignty, all that. Okay, pluralism is plural theory of sovereignty is relevant as compared to Austin's theory of sovereignty. Fine. Next, section B. Any doubts in this? Section A. Okay, section B. Comment. First one is elitist theory of democracy. Again, many times on different notions of sovereignty, questions are there. In that, elitist theory is also very important. I have provided notes on group. Please read that elitist theory of democracy. As question is for 10 marks, directly start with elitist theory of democracy. Okay, elitist theory of democracy. You can mention those Italian trio, Mosca, Robert Michels, and Pareto. They gave concepts like circulation of elites, iron law of oligarchy, So these keywords should be there in the introduction. Fine. So introduction should be with these Italian scholars, Mosca, Michels, Pareto, and keywords circulation of elites and end of oligarchy. That is first. They have given this particular concept in, we can say, first early decades of the 20th century, okay, 1910s. But in true sense, this theory, elitist theory, was established by Schumpeter, 1940s. He criticized representative democracy. Schumpeter criticized representative democracy and argued that people of representative democracy argue that power lies with the people and people elect their representative, and through representative people will enjoy the power. That is wrong according to Schumpeter. People are just consumers for these representatives. So he gives market model of democracy. In the elections, what is right now happening, the voters are just consumers and leaders are suppliers. So they are just consumers of leaders' policies, elite policies, and etc. They do not have any freedom. They just vote, and after that, all power is enjoyed by the elites. Elite class enjoys everything. So Schumpeter rejected representative democracy and gave market model of democracy. Power lies with the elitist. Power lies with the leaders, not with the people. That is his understanding. Same was given by Sartori also and Raymond Aron also. You can add all these people. Don't restrict yourself with the Schumpeter, Sartori and Raymond Aron. They also believe that it is not wrong to have elite in the democracy. Common people do not have that hunger, that commitment to be in the public offices or the public places. Leaders do have that hunger, that commitment. So according to Sartori, it is not wrong to have elite in the democracy. Rather, it is very difficult if we don't have elites in the democracy or leaders. Problem will be there if we do not have leaders. Leader provides the platform, and through that democracy can be saved. That is the understanding of Sartori. Same Raymond Aron also taught. That's why it is also known as realist theory of democracy. Elitist theory of democracy also understood as realist. Why? Because they give real picture of democracy. What representative democrats were saying, that it is democracy is rule of people, by the people, for the people, but that is wrong according to this particular school. And to the extent that is also correct. If we see the nature of democracies across the world, India and all other Western countries also, see Wright Mills and all those people, they also talk about circulation of beliefs, and that in the West. Even pluralist theory also talk about power lies with the groups, pressure groups, and etc. That is true. But in the conclusion, you can give radical theory of Macpherson. You can give alternative to elitist theory. It is true, elitists are saying that is true, but one should not think in that way. Our endeavor should be to give power to the people. Deliberative democracy or radical theory of democracy given by Macpherson. If question is comment. If question is explain, elucidate, then you can just explain this particular theory. No need to comment. Okay? Fine? Any doubts? Okay. Next question. Plato's theory of education. Last year there was question on Plato's theory of forms, ideas. Correct? So I have added this Plato's theory of education. Again, Plato's idea. Plato's ideas. Theory of education, directly start with theory of education in the introduction. In his book Republic, you can mention Rousseau. According to Rousseau, it is the best, finest book on the education. Fine. Under the influence of Socrates, you can mention in the introduction, knowledge is virtue. So these keywords should be there in your introduction. Theory of education, Plato, in his famous book Republics. Rousseau, under the influence of Socrates, knowledge is virtue. Fine. So his theory of education essentially talks about, we can say, establishment of ideal state ruled by philosopher king. The main concern of Plato was to establish ideal state ruled by philosopher king, and he studied education system of Spartans and Athenian or Athens. Based on these two models, he clubbed these two models and came up with his theory of education, where he talked about giving philosophical, mental as well as physical education to the people from start to 50 years. 3 stages, 0 to 20, 20 to 35, then 35 to 50. And he added all the people, including women also. And that's why he is also known as first feminist. Some people have called him first feminist because of that also. He allowed women to have education. And final destiny is to find out philosopher ruler. Until philosophers are the ruler, there is no end to predicament of human beings or society. So he wanted to find out true philosopher, ruler, who is reluctant to rule. And that is the intention, that is the intention behind Plato's theory of education. Okay, of course, in the conclusion you can criticize, but his intention was fine, to have best ruler for the society. But it was state controlled, it was not having any scope for the critical thinking because it was controlled by the state. You can mention Karl Popper and etc. to criticize his theory of education. But in the conclusion, you can his intention was to find out philosopher king, nothing more than that, mention and conclude. Fine. The next question, Isaiah Berlin's notion of value pluralism. Berlin, in his famous book, Two Concepts of Liberty, came up with value pluralism. Already there was one question on this value pluralism. I think in 2013, 20 marks, there was one question on Isaiah Berlin's value pluralism. In his Two Concepts of Liberty, which was in 1958, he came up with value pluralism. What was the context? You should write context in the next paragraph. Against value monism of liberals. For liberals like J.S. Mill, liberty was the supreme value, and all others' value were having no relevance. Because of that, liberalism was in decline. Because of this value monism. In that context, he gave his concept of value pluralism to maintain, to establish relevance of liberalism. Because this liberalism was coming under threat from other schools like cultural, relativist and etc. So he wanted to give this plural concept, and that's why the name value pluralism in the context of value monism of liberals, classical liberals or traditional liberals. He said that what is the essential idea of value pluralism? We cannot have hierarchy of values, and we cannot measure values. These are the two essential concepts of value pluralism. There cannot be hierarchy like liberty, then equality, then justice and etc. All values are equal or important, rather not important. And we cannot measure also. We cannot say this is important and this is not important. No, we cannot measure the significance of values also. So that is his concept of value pluralism. Some people have criticized it might lead to the moral relativism, but he rejected that. According to him, I am not moral relativist. You can add this point. Berlin rejected counterattack that his idea is very close to moral relativism. But no, he said that I am not blind. If you are saying that my value gives me permission, to kill others, so I will not adhere to that idea. So he rejected his labeling of Berlin as value or moral relativist. Okay, then you can conclude with that value pluralism or dialogue among civilizations, etc., etc., in the conclusion. Fine. Next one is the law is reason unaffected by desire. Aristotle. Okay. What is the context? In the introduction, you should write the context. Context is to give alternative to philosopher king. Correct? Plato established the rule of expert, that is philosopher king, in Athens, and he said that this is the best or the ideal state. Plato. Against this Plato's idea, Aristotle in his book The Politics came up with rule of law rather than philosopher king. So to counter philosophers Plato's idea of philosopher king, he said that the law is reason unaffected by desire. No matter what you are, that is philosopher king, you are having rich education and etc. Though Plato was saying that philosopher is reluctant to rule, no, but somewhere, sometimes, definitely there will be passion or desire as a human being. So Aristotle said that we cannot take chance. Rule of philosopher king cannot be having stability. Someday passion might come. To establish stable society, because he was conservative, he established rule of law over philosopher king. Then he justified that why? Because we need stability, we need continuity, and all institutions are important, like family, then state, and etc. So based on that, he established the law is reason unaffected by desire. Okay. Then he proposed polity as a golden mean. Golden? You can just mention that. Just to give different perspective on this particular concept, law and desire. Okay. Law and desire. But even law making can have passion sometimes. No, we cannot say that every time law can have foolproof planning, or it can be just. Okay, law can be unjust, and unjust law is not a law at all. Okay, so it is not true universal. The law is a reason unaffected by desire. Even lawmaking can have desire, passion, and law can be unjust. Okay, you can just mention that. But of course, rule of law is better than philosopher king. Fine. Any doubts? Then relevance of conceptualist approach to the study of political theory, context and text. Relevance of contextualist approach Okay, you can directly start with contextualist approach to the political theory. No need to mention what is political theory and etc. Context. Cambridge School, scholars like Skinner, John Donne, and Pocock. They revived this traditional approach, historical approach, and gave the contextual approach to the study of political theory. In the context of study of classics, textual approach was saying that we should study classic as it is. Classics like Republic or Leviathan. That is textual approach. Take as it is. Whatever there, take that text as it is. Don't bring any mix up in that particular study. That is textual approach. That is traditional, we can say. But contextual approach said that we have to understand context also. You can mention Lasky, every scholar is a child of his or her time, every thinker. Okay, if you want to understand Hobbes, you have to understand context of his time also, unstable polity of UK and all that. If you want to understand Locke, you have to understand context of his time, which was stable. So he gave positive theory of human nature. So contextualist people are saying that if you want to understand classics or any other scholar or school, we have to understand context also. Context also. That is their understanding. So in that context, they talks about to understand language also and time also. In which era, in which time the scholar was there. So language means, take the example of Plato. For Plato, justice is different. At that time, meaning of justice was different. But today's context, today's concept of justice is different. So, in the context of language also, there is difference. So we cannot take it as it is. The concept of justice in Plato is different. We cannot bring that understanding in today's world. To understand that justice, we have to understand context of Plato. That was their understanding, contextualist understanding of political theory. So you can mention all those people. You can mention one's commentary on this. James Tully argued that we have to understand right context also. One must understand right context also. It is possibility that you are understanding wrong context. Okay. What can be the conclusion of this contextualist approach? Derrida, reconstruction, postmodernism, reconstruction and deconstruction. Of course, they revived historical approach and etc. So you can conclude with Derrida, postmodernism, reconstruct. We have to reconstruct and deconstruct every text, every understanding. Every understanding has double meaning, double reading. Okay. Fine. Then next, what do you understand by representative democracy? Do modern forms of representative democracy deserve to be described as democratic? Next question. What do you understand by representative democracy? Okay, so you can start with that classical definition, representative democracy. You can start with Locke also. Locke established representative democracy through his consent understanding. Tacit consent, explicit consent. Then you can mention J.S. Mill also. And theories of representations or representatives. We have unchecked, uncontrolled representatives like Edmund Burke and J.S. Mill. Bentham, regulated representatives. Theories of representation or representative. So representative democracy was given by these people because direct democracy was not possible in large countries, population wise or territory wise. So and on that basis, representative democracy was born. And we have different theories of representation also. As I said, Bentham, Edmund Burke and J.S. Mill. J.S. Mill and Burke argue that we should trust representatives because they will work in the interest of people, and once we have elected them, selected them, we should follow them. Bentham is saying that we should regulate them time and again. Then you can come to the next topic. Do modern forms of representative democracy deserve to be described as democratic? Now, here is we can say two approaches are there to tackle this question. Two modern forms of representative democracy. You can give examples of countries like USA, China, India, like what Macpherson did. Correct. Macpherson argued that even communist countries can be considered as democracy. Correct. The liberal was saying that other forms of democracies are not true democracies. But Macpherson argued that even one party democracy, one party dominance country or the polity can be considered democratic, or communist countries can be considered democracies. liberals do not have patent on the democracies. Okay, so based on that also you can tackle this particular question. But if you are using analytical method, then you can view norms or philosophies or values of representative democracy. Representative democracy, why this democracy came into existence? Because it was thought, it was envisaged that the representatives will work in the interest of people first, then free and fair elections will be there, intra-party democracy will be there, free media will be there, and peaceful transfer of power will be there. So these were the noble ideals or the visions of representative democracy. If you analysis of all these principles, then you might feel that the modern forms of democracies cannot be considered as true democracies or described as democratic. Why? Because if you see the track record of representatives, including India, you will find that many criminals are there, background criminal nature. So that representative democracy, which is controlled by the criminals in this context, if data is saying that ADRC is saying that more than 40% MPs are criminal background, they have criminal background. So if you add this criteria, representatives, clean background of representatives, certainly we cannot say that many countries can be considered as democratic countries. Okay, then free and fair elections. In many countries, free and fair elections, that is an issue, including Bangladesh and to some extent in our country also right now, though it is political, but that is an issue. When in the United States, during time of Hillary Clinton and Trump, first election 2016, that issue was there, free and fair election, funding and etc. Okay, fine. Then intra-party democracy, that is also not that dynastic politics and etc. Freedom of speech and expression, that is also very disappointment. And peaceful transfer of power. You can give example of the USA also, Capitol Hill attack and etc. Then if you add all these points in your analysis, it might be that modern forms of democracies cannot be labeled as true democracies. So what is required? Deliberative democracy. So conclude with deliberative democracy or radical democracy, giving power to powerless. Representative democracy, of course we should have that particular. We cannot replace representative democracy, but reforms are needed in the representative democracy, and representative democracy along with deliberative democracy can serve the purpose. Okay, we can quote Amartya Sen, Joshua Cohen, all those people in the conclusion. Understood? Okay. Next, describe the salient features of the fascist state and society. Next question. Describe the salient features of fascist state and society. Again, you can start with fascism. You can use Mussolini. Okay, idea of fascism. You can use opportunism, hodgepodge of ideas, etc. This is fascism. And what are the characteristics of fascist state and society? You can club both together. Fascist state, of course, complete authority to the state, party rule, one party rule, leadership, personality cult. Then you can mention autarky, economic sphere, complete autarky. Then corporatist states. All these features are there of fascist state. You can mention them. Society, there is no place for rationality. Okay, leadership is supreme, so one should follow the leader. Nationalism, hyper-nationalism. Okay, Aryan race and etc. So all those features are there with society. Okay. So question is very simple. Describe the salient features of fascist state and society. So all you can mention all those features. Leadership, one party dominance. There is no difference between party rule and government in fascist states. party is government, government is party, fascist parties. Okay, so those are features of fascist state and society. Fine. Then define ideology, critically examine the end of ideology debate. Ideology, already we have discussed this, ideology set of ideas. Okay. Tracy, D. Tracy, according to him, it can be considered set of ideas or science of ideas. Science of ideas. And we have different ideologies, liberalism, Marxism, etc. etc. That is ideology. Now, end of ideology debate came in 1950s, late 1950s. Daniel Day, S.M. Lipset. According to them, ideology has lost the relevance, and what is right now happening is development. Detente phase, and whether you are communist or liberal or the capitalist, all are striving for development. Economy has taken front seat and politics has back seat. So there is loss of relevance of ideology. So that is end of ideology debate 1950s, 60s. Daniel Day, S.M. Lipset. Now this debate is not perfect or it is not over. Still ideologies do carry relevance or meaning. Once again new ideas came into existence like postmodernism, clash of civilizations, even radical feminism and etc. So new ideas emerged. Even liberal ideas were projected as end of history in 1989 by Francis Fukuyama, but that was also not the complete picture. New ideas emerged. So this end of ideology remained debatable issue, or it was an ideology itself, according to C. Wright Mills. Correct? Fine. Then next, what do you understand by rights? Briefly describe the various theories of rights. Introduction, rights, you can mention Lasky directly. No human being or rights are required for the comprehensive development of human being. Okay, human being cannot be at his best, man cannot be at his best without having rights according to Lasky. So you can mention rights, concept of rights in the introduction by Lasky or T.S. Green. Okay, rights are required. You can establish the importance of rights in the introduction by quoting Lasky and T.S. Green. Okay, so as far as rights are concerned, there are different theories, and question is asking to bring all those theories. This is very important. Now we have different theories. Natural rights theory given by Locke. You can mention that natural rights theories. There you can briefly discuss about Bentham's idea. He rejected that natural rights theory. Then you can mention moral theory of rights. This is again very important, moral theory of rights. 10 marker might come on this moral theory of rights. Again, it was influenced by Immanuel Kant and T.S. Green. Moral theory of rights, Immanuel Kant and T.S. Green. In the contemporary era, Dworkin has given this or extended this moral theory of rights. Rights trumps, or rights as trumps. Already there was question on this, rights as trumps. Dworkin was influenced by moral theory of rights, remember. Under the influence of this moral theory means, according to them, morality of society decides what is right, what should be the nature of rights, right, wrong. Society's right and wrong decides the nature of rights. So Dworkin clubbed or interlinked law and morality when he talked about rights as trumps. Okay, so morality, law cannot be there without having morality. Okay, that was his understanding. That is moral theory of rights. However, he said that rights trumps over everything. There cannot be anything in front of rights. That is, rights trumps. But he even accepted that sometimes we have to give, we can say, concessions if you are compromising rights of an individual in the benefit of society. Dworkin has also accepted that. Habermas has criticized his theory. Habermas has criticized Dworkin's theory of moral theory because sometimes we have to compromise individuals' right, according to Habermas. Well, Joseph Raz has also said the same thing. Okay. can mention Marxist theory of rights. I am talking about different, briefly describe various theories of rights. Natural theory of rights, moral theory of rights, then Marxist theory of rights. Marxists believe that people do not have rights. I mean, workers do not have rights. All rights are enjoyed by the capitalist. Capitalist. Okay. Then we have welfare theory of rights. Fourth theory, welfare theory of rights. Welfare theory, again, which was influenced by Bentham. Greatest happiness of greatest number. Greatest happiness of greatest number. Then we have traditional theory of rights. Traditional theory of rights, given by, we can say, Edmund Burke, or historical theory of rights, Edmund Burke. Tradition, culture define your rights. Okay, so all these theories you need to discuss here briefly. Briefly describe the various theories of rights. Okay, moral theory, natural rights, social welfare theory, then traditional theory of rights, and you can conclude, because question is just asking you to briefly discuss various theories of rights. Understood? Then discuss the contribution of Buddhist traditions to the Indian political traditions. Again, very simply, this also, there was one question last year. Buddhist traditions to the Indian political thought. You can start with Buddhism or Buddhist tradition. You can add Bhikkhu Parekh in the introduction. Indian political thought, continuity, especially ancient Indian political thought, there is no change. Or Buddhism is considered as rebel child of Hinduism. You can bring that in the introduction. And it, of course, it gave ethical foundation to the Indian political thought or ancient Indian political thought. Discuss the contribution of Buddhist tradition to the Indian political thought. The most important contribution is ethical foundation to the Indian political thought. It is accepted, no doubt about that. Buddhist traditions, we can bring life teachings of Buddha, various Buddhist doctrines, Ashoka's Dhamma, okay, Amok Varsha's book, Jataka stories, all those Buddhist materials and traditions establish various doctrines in the political theory or political discourse in the context of India. First one is ethical foundation. Second, it is Buddhist tradition is deliberative, and it established republicanism also. It established deliberative democracy along with giving egalitarian principle, Sangha, okay, social contract also. It was also first, we can say, Indian type of socialism or communism, because private property, they rejected private property. So all those contributions are there from the Buddhist traditions. Not only that, Buddhist tradition influenced 20th century scholars like Ambedkar, Neo Buddhism, and Jawaharlal Nehru also. Baki, ethical foundation, peace, non-violence, and etc. You can add in your understanding or your answer. Understood this Buddhist tradition? Any doubts? Next question is, C. Briefly discuss the feminist critique of public-private dichotomy. Again, this is radical feminism. Radical feminism. In the context of personal and public sphere. Separation of public and personal sphere. Okay, historically Aristotle separated public and private. So in that context, radical theorists give personal is political, like Carol Hanisch. You can think that. And in that debate, they talked that the public sphere, of course, it was dominated by patriarchy and even personal sphere. And historically, the state was asked not to intervene in the public private sphere. But they talk that the private sphere is also important. There is also politics. That's why personal is political. To end that discrimination or that gender-based discrimination, they talk about gender and sex. Okay, sex is biological, gender is sociological. So in this gender discrimination, they talk about differentiated citizenship and giving justice based on gender. Okay, public-private dichotomy. So here you can all mention all those people: Kate Millett, sexual politics, sexual contract, personalist political, Catherine McKinnon, differentiated citizenship, Iris Okin, then Sushan Mola Okin. Okay, so all those feminist scholars you can mention in this tableau. Understood? Okay. Next question: what is multiculturalism? Critically examine Will Kimlicka's views on multiculturalism. Again, you can start with multiculturalism introduction directly. What is multiculturalism? It is again an ideology of non-dominant section of society. Of non-dominant section of society. It is given by World Bank. Multiculturalism is an ideology of non-dominant sections of the society. In the political sphere, it became important in the context of rising immigrations, migrations, and Will Kimlicka gave this theory in the context of that only. According to Kimlicka, refugees and immigrants should not have citizenship, equal citizenship right. He talks about giving minorities or different cultural groups due in the society, but he restricts that only national minorities, and he restricts or he rejects the claim of immigrants or refugees. Okay, multicultural citizenship, Will Kimlicka, correct? That is thin multiculturalism. Against this, Biko Parekh came up with new idea, that is rethinking multiculturalism. Biko Parekh rethinking multiculturalism, and he criticized Will Kimlicka's idea of multiculturalism. He talked that all the minorities, all the cultural groups should have equal rights according to their own culture. So that understanding is thick multiculturalism. Correct? So Will Kimlicka talks about different sets of rights to the minorities, ethnic, political, correct? All types of rights he talks about. And Indian Constitution already has given 5th schedule, 6th schedule, then Article 29 and 30, special representations also. It was there for the Anglo-Indians. Right now that is not there, but it was there. So Will Kimlicka talks about all kind of rights, different treatments for the minorities, giving different sets of rights. Okay, fine. But his understanding is very restricted, and which was rightly criticized by Biko Parekh. So you can conclude with that. Then define in your own words what socialism is, what is meant by state socialism. Fine. Socialism, you can mention that. Again, question is asking to define in your own words what socialism is. So you can start with your own idea of socialism. No need to mention any scholar or quote here. Okay. So generally we give theory or the definition of Schumpeter and etc. But avoid, because question is directly asking define in your own words what socialism is. Socialism is, again we can say ki community or common ownership, and it stands for equality of outcome, and we can say rejection of private property in your own words. Okay, common ownership, private property is considered as anathema or enemy, and equality of outcome. Socialism stands for that, but it has different meanings. We have different notions of socialism, and in that context you can mention different types here, because question is asking define. So briefly you can add different types of socialism. Of course, utopian socialism also you can mention, before Marx and after Marx. Marxist socialism also you can mention, Marx socialism, scientific socialism. He labeled his socialism scientific socialism. After Marx, evolutionary socialism, guild socialism, syndicalism, and Fabian socialism. So briefly mention all these 4-5 socialism in your answer, and then come to the state socialism. State socialism is very close to again Fabian socialism. Means state will play important role to bring socialist ideas in the society. establishment of common ownership, giving justice to the poor people, welfare thought and etc. So state socialism you can add here Lasky, Ambedkar also, and Nehru also. Ambedkar's idea is also state socialism. The state will control important aspects of life like economy also, public enterprises also, and state will decide who should get what. Okay, so that is state socialism. Right now there is debate in the Western societies also. Right now in the US and etc. In the context of socialism, this concept is there. So this topic is very important right now. State socialism. So state will control or state will decide how to bring that socialism. So ours is also considered as state socialism, India, when we establish welfare state, DPSPs and etc. So Indian notion of socialism also can be considered as state socialism. State will bring the socialism. The socialism through the state as a primary actor to bring the socialism. That is state socialism. Almost Fabian socialism, as I said, Ambedkar, then Nehru, Lasky, etc. All those people you can mention in this particular answer. The last question, power is never localized here or there, but rather employed and exercised through net-like organization. Michael Foucault. Okay, this is post-modern understanding of power. It is again unconventional. Introduction, Michael Foucault, a postmodernist scholar. In his book, we can say Discipline or Biopower, gave his concept of power under the influence of Nietzsche. That is, knowledge is power. So knowledge power connection he established under the influence of Nietzsche. In the introduction directly you can start. Conventional or traditional understanding of power is power of A over B, and power is localized, centralized. That is conventional understanding. Marxist understanding talks about state is an instrument of bourgeois class, and whosoever controls the base will control the power. That is localized. But Foucault says that power is never localized. Power is never centralized. It cannot be identified where the site of power is. Power is flowing freely everywhere in society, just like blood flows in capillaries. So that is understanding of Foucault. He gave different concepts to define his theory of power, like governmentality, biopower, etc. He added different examples also. Okay. On the basis of that, he gave example of doctor, family, church, and based on that he said that just like doctor exercises power on the patient, so power is also exercised by the patient on doctor. So because power is everywhere and everyone gets affected by the interaction. So that is his understanding of power. So he gives unconventional, very different understanding of power, or micro level understanding of power, or sociological understanding of power, contrary to the conventional understanding of power, orthodox understanding of power. Okay, this concept of power was criticized by Habermas. You can add critics Habermas and Noam Chomsky and Habermas. Both have argued that his understanding of power is very generalistic understanding, or oversimplification of understanding of power. Power is very complex, and we have to understand that also. So you can conclude with that. Okay. So this is all about paper first 1A. I hope you have covered well. If you have any kind of doubt, please message me. We'll discuss accordingly. Okay. Thank you for the joining.